subscribing, and leaving comments.
From one end of China to another lives the legend of a terrifying creature.
He was leaning against a tree. I was making a bundle of wood. I stood up and threw it on my back, called out, and started to run away.
It was very scared. And it rolled down the slope, disappeared into a ditch, and escaped.
Can these people be believed? Could there be a mysterious creature roaming these mountainsides? Now, for the first time, the Chinese government has allowed Western scientists in to search for the truth about this legend.
If the kind of creature being described, in fact, actually existed, it would be akin to when the astronauts first set foot on the moon.
A journey into one of the world's great mysteries, this week on Adventure.
Adventure is made possible by viewers like you.
From high in the remote mountains of central China come stories of a strange, half-human, half-ape-like creature. This Yeti-like creature is known to the Chinese as Wildman. Here, time stands still. The legend of the wild man has persisted for over 2,000 years. And even today, millions of Chinese believe in its existence, and their academics study it seriously. But to Western scientists, it's complete nonsense. Who's right? Can such a creature really exist? Two Western scientists have come here to investigate and solve the wild man mystery once and for all. Poirier has impressive credentials for this expedition. He's the first Western anthropologist to track China's rare golden monkey in its natural habitat. That's when he became intrigued by the wild man.
It was 1982 that I first encountered the wild man story, about this creature that sounded half human and half ape. And it almost sounded too good to be true.
Gene is professor of anthropology at Ohio State University and comes to this expedition interested but skeptical. His partner, Richard Greenwell, from Arizona's International Society of Cryptozoology, investigates so-called mythical animals. For years, he's been trying to change Gene's mind and is confident that he will succeed.
On this trip, I think that we have the flexibility to be a little romantic. We're on the Yangtze River going up to the heart of China. A few people have done that, and certainly I think we're the first people who've ever gone up the Yangtze River looking for the wild man. So that in itself, for whatever honor that bestows, it's a first.
This is bad. I thought we'd be on some sort of junk or something. I think it's a metal boat.
It's a much nicer boat than I was on the last time. This way. This is second.
Oh, the tickets.
Gene's intention is to examine every clue with scientific rigor, Although as a seasoned professional, he's doubtful that he'll be convinced by anything they find. Richard, on the other hand, has even gone down the Congo searching for living dinosaurs. They're heading into the very heart of China, to Wanxian, hoping to track down their first lead, something curiously known as the Wildman Institute. Gene is acutely aware that this trip could put his academic reputation on the line. A respectable scientist who seriously pursues a legendary wild man can easily be labeled a crank.
I think there would be people who would think a professor of anthropology shouldn't be on a trip like we're doing now. But from a scientific perspective, if the kind of creature being described, in fact, actually existed, it would be, for anthropology, I think, perhaps akin to when the astronauts first set foot on the moon. So, if there was something out there and it upset everything, every theory that we had, including any thought I ever had, if it made me look like a fool, I could care less. Well, I guess that's one reason why I'm here, because I would like to see the apple cart get upset.
At the moment, they have only a destination, the Wildman Institute. But it will take more than that to establish the truth. The journey ahead won't be easy. Richard has spent his life investigating unknown animals. He knows how hard it is to convince the scientific establishment.
What it would take to prove to the skeptics that something is real, something like the wild man, is really the whole animal. The whole animal itself, or part of it, a significant part of it. Photographs, reports, hairs, footprints, casts, all this is very interesting, but most of them will just, it won't fly. So you've got to have the whole thing.
The Yangtze has played an epic role in Chinese history, but for the riverboatman, it has a more personal meaning.
When you're away from the river, do you miss the river like an old friend? Do you feel like there's a part of your life that's missing?
Yes, and I'm very attached to it.
What is it you have to be careful about in navigating the Yangtze?
When you're sailing, you have to watch out for boats coming in the opposite direction and make sure there's enough room for them to pass. It can sometimes be very dangerous.
50 years ago, the only way to navigate the Yangtze's more turbulent passages was by manpower. Hundreds hauled on ropes, forming a human chain that stretched for over a mile. Today, the 5-deck riverboats are propeller-driven and make the same journey in a tenth of the time. They're traveling through a region known as the Three Gorges. Down the centuries, its mountains have been an inspiration for Chinese poets and painters. But for the past 24 hours, its beauty has been hidden by rain clouds.
The river's rising, look at it.
Yeah.
So could we get stuck with the trucks? I mean,
If this weather continues, we're not going to get up by truck. We're going to get that far, and it's going to be a wasted trip.
But quite suddenly, they have a worse problem.
I guess it was the second night on the boat, something just hit me like a ton of bricks. And that night, I just wanted to die. I ran a high fever. I guess I was delirious.
The ship's doctor comes to Jean's aid with antibiotics, but he can't diagnose the problem. Richard records the house call on his own video camera. Jean's illness could put the whole mission in jeopardy. Finally, Wanxian, the stepping-off point for the expedition. First, Jean seeks treatment at the local hospital, which he knows practices a mixture of Western and traditional Chinese medicine. He's not perturbed by the prospect of an exotic cure.
My grandmother was a local medicine person in the Middle Eastern community where we lived. So people would come to her all the time for various kinds of yucky smelling stuff, but they seem to have worked.
But Jean finds the hospital closed for the day and has another sleepless night.
I had a bad fever again last night.
我可以开药给他打，那个针头我们给他消毒好，带这个消毒的盒子里面，1天之内可以用。
You see the needles here. They used before, but they've been cleaned totally. If you like to take an injection here, they can give you some medicine instead of injection.
Don't they have any needles that were not used before?
No. 他说你没有新的针头吗？
有新的针头。
Tell him we don't mean, you know, I mean, no offense taken, Edward, please, but we would simply prefer clean. Not clean needle. No, don't say clean. We would simply prefer a needle that hadn't been used before. Okay? It's very important.
他们国家习惯就是最好不要用这个人家用过以后的。They can offer you a new needle.
Oh, great. Okay.
我去找一个护士来。
A few minutes.
That's okay.
这等一下，休息一下。
Just wait a few minutes here.
Not even a new needle can lift Jean's depression.
What the hell am I doing here? You know, I want to go home. I have a nice home. I have a dog at home. I have the kids at home. I have the car at home. I could be teaching. I don't need to be here. I mean, where are we? We're out in the middle of nowhere. Who needs to be out in the middle of nowhere when you don't feel well?
His illness has affected the trip, I think, in a couple of ways. It's delayed our project. We had things scheduled for different days that all had to slip a bit.
The Chinese medicine seems to be working, and Jean is feeling stronger. At last, they begin the search for the Wildman Institute.
I asked the woman if she knew where Professor Liu was, and she looked at me startled, and she said to me in perfect English, "I beg your pardon, can I help you?" And I was absolutely startled. Here I was practicing my best Mandarin, and she spoke perfect English, so she helped us find his house.
Go that way or this way?
Like many Chinese scientists, it seems Professor Liu lives at his workplace.
Can we come in?
To their surprise, they are ushered straight through the house to a shed in the backyard that has a big sign in English and Chinese saying that this is the headquarters of the Chinese Wildman Institute. Inside, it is an Aladdin's cave.
Look at all these things. Professor Liu is a committed believer in Wildman. I mean, this is no question about that. I think if you wanted anything, and I mean anything, this man could produce it.
Oh, yeah.
We found several hundred footprints, and I've made casts from 10 of them. I've collected Wildman hair from 10 sightings. At two of those places, we found more than 3,000 hairs. Altogether, I have over 8,000 hairs.
8,000 hairs?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
That's amazing. He showed us a big clump of hair, supposedly wildman hair.
Well, let's see this.
You know, the interesting thing, Richard, about this hair, if it's what it's purported to be, it's probably the most valuable evidence that's available for the existence of wildman. Nevertheless, it's sitting in a box in someone's house, relatively unprotected, and appears to have done that for, what, 5 generations. Can't imagine an important fossil or any other specimen that could be that important sitting so unprotected for such a long period of time.
As for Wildman excrement, the research team has found it many times, but it's hard to preserve. It's smelly, and if you put it into formalin, it disintegrates and loses its shape. In it, we found many wild fruits, bamboo shoots, and hairs from small animals. The shape is like that of human beings, spiral.
Among the evidence Professor Liu shows them is this archive film of the largest search ever for wildman, organized by the Chinese government in 1976. 6 different witnesses reported seeing the creature at the same time. 110 scientists took part in the year-long hunt. They found giant footprints, what looked like human excrement, and circular depressions in the bamboo that were described optimistically as nests.
Never did it cross my mind that Professor Liu was a charlatan. I think he was absolutely genuine. I don't think, however, that he's in a position to test the veracity of some of the witnesses and some of the evidence that comes to him, because he is absolutely, totally committed to the existence of this creature.
After 14 hours with the unstoppable Professor Liu, they leave with no tangible evidence, not even a piece of hair. They did get another clue, however, the name of an important eyewitness. To find him, they have to drive 200 miles through the thinly populated mountainous region of central China to a place called Wuxi, an area known as Wildman Country.
We've been on the road now, what, Richard, 8 hours, 9 hours? Another 2 hours at least to go.
Jean and Richard are the first Westerners to venture into this part of China. It is not quite what they expected. With mounting anticipation, they reach Wuxi, a surprisingly large town in the middle of nowhere. Professor Liu has told them most evidence and eyewitness accounts come from the mountains around here. So if wildman is to be found, this is the place to begin looking. Here, Jean and Richard will finally question someone who has come face to face with a wildman. They've traveled a long way to find the journalist whose memorable encounter with a mysterious creature sparked off the great hunt in 1976. The sighting happened on a lonely mountain road in the middle of the night.
This happened in May 1976. 6 of us local party leaders were driving in a jeep. Around 1 in the morning, the driver saw something in the road. He shouted, "Look, there is an animal ahead of us." He braked hard and stopped 1 meter away from the animal. The leader of the agricultural committee got out, picked up a stone, and threw it at the creature's backside. We could see the animal clearly. It was covered all over in red hair. Its eyes looked human, but nothing was reflected in them, and his mouth protruded a lot. The mountain was very steep, so when the animal tried to escape by climbing the slope, it actually stood up. I could see that it was a head taller than a human being, a good head taller.
So possibly 2 meters.
So a little over 6 feet.
It's not that high, really, but
it's not that big.
It's tall. It's tall, though. It's big. And the color was red. Was it a light red, a dark red? Did the red vary? Was there variation in the red throughout the body?
It was red all over. It was very scared. And it rolled down the slope, disappeared into a ditch, and escaped.
Would you call that animal the wild man?
The local peasants call it wild man, but I call it an unknown animal.
That was something, wasn't it? Well, I mean, red hair all over, the big belly, and yet the thing that really stunned me was that it dropped on all fours. To me, it sounds like an orangutan.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is that he said it wasn't an orangutan. It was different. It was bigger. The main thing was that it was too big to be an orangutan, and he said the face was different.
Yeah.
But how big is too big?
But he said it was that the animal that it most resembled was the orang, if I remember correctly.
Yes, he did admit that in the end. Yeah.
But orangs, as we know, have been extinct in China. I mean, haven't been in China for
hundreds of years.
It was Richard who had the idea. Why not commission a local artist who's also a wildman researcher to do a wanted poster based on the journalist's description and all the known evidence of the creature? The trouble with eyewitness reports is that the observer's imagination can run riot.
In '82, we went up into the mountains in Hebei, deep into the mountains in Hebei, looking for monkeys. And we, myself, and the Chinese colleagues that I was with, we all fell asleep along a river. But it was a beautiful spot, and we all had taken off our clothes down to our underwear. And we took a bath, and we just all fell asleep on the shore. And I don't know how long we were asleep, and that probably doesn't matter, but all of a sudden heard people screaming, Yeren, or wild man. And we all just jumped up, thinking, well, this thing just happened to be in our midst. But what it was myself. The number of the people, I guess local people, had never seen anybody that looked like me before. And I have more body hair than most Chinese have. And I guess I just looked very strange to them. So I became, for them, the wild man. And as we went back to the district center, I mean, children would run away because their parents had told them this story. So it's interesting. In a sense, my presence reestablished the story of wild man, at least for a while.
Wildman posters have been put up all over the region, and as Jean and Richard wait for the response, they explore an animal warehouse where local hunters sell their kills. When Jean was last in China, he found the skeleton of an unknown species of monkey in a similar warehouse, there's a small chance that they may find a clue to the real identity of Wildman here.
They smell good. Ugh.
Well, they haven't cleaned anything. No, they just leave it all together to grind it up.
That's good because it's clearing out my sinuses. I'm getting rid of my cold very rapidly here. Another monkey. That's why we couldn't find monkeys in 1982. We should have spent all our time in the warehouses.
Look at this, Gene. Well, most of the teeth are missing, but yeah, that's a bear. That's a bear.
Okay, well, I'm more interested in the monkey stuff than that anyway.
It's sort of macabre, isn't it? They haven't cleaned them or nothing, and...
The thing is to put it in a cultural context.
Yeah.
I think it disgusts me that these animals are here, and I'm mad as hell that the monkeys are here because there's not enough monkeys left anyway.
And where does it end up?
A lot of it ends up in Hong Kong, in Chinese whiskey, and then they take it for an aphrodisiac or something else. I don't know. They take the glands from this thing and make medicine, and then the bear paws are supposed to be a very important aphrodisiac. And you can take this stuff to Hong Kong and get a fortune for it, which is unfortunate. I still don't think the creature exists. But deep down, really deep down, I also feel that they're better off that we don't know that they exist. Because once we capture one, it's on the road to extinction.
Look how soft this is. It's a domestic cat, I think.
Well, somebody's missing a pet tonight, maybe.
The posters pay off, and to Jean and Richard's delight, there's a witness in town. She's traveled 6 days to reach them.
It happened some years ago. I was cutting wood in the mountains early one morning. He was standing there like this. He was leaning against a tree. I was making a bundle of wood. I stood up and threw it on my back, called out, and started to run away.
What color was the hair? And was the color the same all over the body?
Red.
I think the woman seemed quite credible. She traveled a long distance, several days, to come and see us. My impression was she stated the facts as she knew them. She didn't get anything out of it, and that was it. Against a tree. Was it standing on two legs, or was it standing with the legs there and the hands on the ground? One of the thrusts that we have to do is talking to more witnesses, and we begin building up sort of a composite or an identikit of the animal, you know, like the police do when they're looking for somebody.
Every time we interview somebody, you have to sit there and wonder, what do they have to gain by telling you this story? You scared it away. You hollered at it and it ran away? I can't see any reason for these people to lie to us. I don't know what in the world they would gain by lying to us.
Did it walk on two legs or on four legs? Did it ever get down like this? It never got down. No?
The two men who testified that they'd seen Wildman are from this small village in the foothills. The villagers were so terrified by the story that they downed tools and refused to work in the fields. The harvest that year was so poor that scientists were dispatched from Beijing to investigate the story. Our detectives head back to town for a special briefing from the local science committee. They learn more than they dared hope for. At last, real evidence. The committee hand over a sample of hair found at the scene of a sighting and believed to belong to the Wildman.
Richard, can you see this?
Yes, it is.
This is...
They're dark.
They're dark, yeah.
Which case was that here?
Jean and Richard are grateful to discover that all recent Wildman sightings have been carefully mapped.
There's someone there who can help us locate the Wildman. Is there an investigator out here now looking for the Wildman?
They are directed to a remote spot, a day's difficult drive away, where China's top Wildman hunter is tracking the creature. While the science committee is making arrangements for their expedition into wildman country, Jean and Richard stock up at the local market. Jean has to watch his diet because he's not fully recovered from his fever. He'll track down some medicinal herbs and plenty of fresh fruit.
Well, I know, but these have to last about a week, don't they? Don't they ripen?
They're not gonna decay.
Okay, get these.
Okay.
Wuxi is an ancient trading post whose people live off the land. 1,500 miles from Shanghai, it's in a part of China that seems almost untouched by the age of technology. There are no luxuries here, but equally, nobody starves. It's the first time the locals have seen Westerners in their town.
360. Looks good. Oh, yum.
Yet even in this remote backwater, our scientists observe the first signs of a crack in the old culture. By day, the young do physical exercises in honor of the revolution. But at night, they march to a different drum.
The first time we were in China, there was no dancing. You never saw people dancing. You didn't see people holding hands. I don't believe I ever saw a woman, for example, with makeup and lipstick on.
"6 hours into uncharted country, Jean and Richard are keenly aware that the hunt has really begun. The man they're looking for is more than an eyewitness. He has devoted his life to tracking the creature down. But the problem is to find him in this deeply forbidding territory.
I've spent a lot of time in mountains in different parts of the world, and I have really never seen that kind of terrain before. It's just so steep and so rugged.
The road runs out, and they spend the night here before the long march begins. But our scientists have problems more intractable than the terrain. The local government has insisted on providing the kind of escort that would frighten every wild man within a 100-mile radius. With some diplomatic surgery, they managed to trim the escort by half. But there are dangerous animals in these forests, so they keep the soldiers.
The mountains rose abruptly, almost 70, 80 degrees. And trees were growing on them. I don't know how they grew on them, but the hills just go straight up almost.
There could be a population explosion of wild men, and that forest would still be so dense that if they were multiplying like bunnies, we still wouldn't see them.
this wildman hunter named Lee, who apparently has been hunting this animal for 10 years and lives and works pretty much alone up in the hills, in the forests. He's spent about 10 years now living in mountains like this, even in the winter. The drops were like 100, 200 feet sometimes, I think, and quite dangerous.
The strain of the climb has brought a recurrence of Gene's fever, but now that they're within sight of their goal, he's determined to continue. The wild man hunter they're seeking is somewhere in these mountains. They're told he has no permanent base, but camps on the riverbank. At last, after a day's march, and as the light begins to fade, Richard and Gene stumble upon the wild man hunter's hideout.
Someone there. Someone up there. Chopping wood.
Oh, 你好，你好，来了。卫官好。
I think that's him.
早，好不好？
你们好。从咱们这里来了。
Well, this Mr. Liu is an incredible man. The dedication he has is to me, is practically beyond comprehension. He goes for weeks, sometimes months, without seeing people. I couldn't begin to do anything like that. It's just mind-boggling.
While their escorts take a breather before setting up camp, Gene and Richard hear the wild man hunter's fascinating story.
My life came from nature, and I might end my life going back to nature. It's as if my soul has been possessed by nature, possessed by the wild man. My heart is full of the wild man. I have to live my life in solitude. It's like living in a desert. Maybe I'll be without a family. Maybe I'll live in misery all my life. Maybe I'll die in the forest someday. But I don't regret any of it. A man is like that.
We spent a long time talking to Lee, and he told us about 3 sightings of wild man he personally had. If he's not lying, it either means he's terribly mistaken, which seems very, very unlikely to me because of his experience, or that he really saw a 2 or 2.5 meter hair-covered primate, which doesn't exist in the world of science.
Lee is leading his visitors into what he believes is the creature's own territory. This is primeval forest, and the vegetation is so thick you could pass within feet of a mysterious primate and never notice it. There's one man missing from the hunting party. Unable to shake off that second bout of fever, Gene's been forced to stay behind, and he's devastated. Not to be in at the climax is a bitter blow. What if they find Wild Man without him?
Some footprints had been found in a specific spot that we went to. They told me that those footprints had been about 42 centimeters in length. Lee told me that when he decided to go hunting for it, he went to his superiors and asked for free time to go and look for a wife. Apparently he was eligible for wife hunting, and instead of that he went wildman hunting, and that's all he's done since. We climbed down this gully to look for some evidence, and all of a sudden he spotted a cave. Okay, go ahead. It's a big cave, isn't it? Well, the sort of evidence one looks for in caves, of course, is bedding material, mattresses made out of vegetation, remains of meals, maybe small animals, fur, bones, footprints, hairs, anything that could indicate an animal's lived there. Should we go back? We looked around, but we couldn't really find any real evidence, so we moved on. This is what it is? Mr. Lee was certainly very expert at being able to tell what kind of animals have actually eaten what kinds of things just by the way in which the vegetation has been mangled. The factors that have prevented our finding it up to now continue to be there. Factors like the remoteness of the terrain, how hard it is to get in there. The animal itself maybe is very intelligent and very elusive. You've got to do something different. Perhaps going in with 10,000 people and enclosing an area like in a tiger hunt.
Even though there was only a remote chance of spotting Wildman, they are left with more than a glimmer of hope. They now know that if such a creature really exists, it could certainly survive undetected in such a desolate habitat. And they have one final piece of evidence to take back with them. Those mysterious human-like hairs they were given in Wuxi. So they travel 1,000 miles to Shanghai to have the evidence analyzed. Jean has worked with Chinese scientists before and has a high regard for their professionalism. Professor Cao at Huangdong University is using a high-powered electron microscope to compare the hair sample with other hair samples from Chinese animals and humans. An animal can be identified from the size of the scales on the outside of the hair and from its internal structure.
What makes this unique? How do you tell that that's not a hair from a monkey or an ape or a bear?
Microfiber intermediary.
Jean is amazed. These hairs are completely different from any of the other hairs. What's more, they have both human and other animal characteristics.
The hair analyses really restructured my whole thinking on the problem. There are hairs from animals out there that don't fall into any recognizable categories at this point in time.
Stunned by this news, they go directly to Fudan University on the other side of town, where the nuclear science department can do an even more sophisticated analysis.
Are there other kinds of experiments that need to be done on this hair that could help?
I think the sample we should analyze more. The sample number, I mean.
Has this kind of analysis ever been done before on wildman hair? Is this the first time this has been applied to?
Yes, for using pixie technique. Yeah. The first experiment.
Here, they bombard the hair sample with protons to reveal its chemical makeup.
And the results suggest that some of these hairs are an unknown animal.
Oh, unknown, yeah.
An unknown animal.
And
not an unknown primate or unknown animal.
Because we make a optical
Professor Lee goes one step further in narrowing down what this creature might be.
This hair is belong to primate.
Uh-huh. So the unknown animal is an unknown primate?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's that specific then. It's an unknown primate.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you don't know what kind of primate it is.
No, I don't know.
It's not a human primate?
No.
It's not a monkey?
No.
It's not an ape?
No.
Okay, but it's a primate?
Yes.
The whole character of their expedition has changed. These scientists suggest that there is a creature out there that is closely related to us. The question now is, what can it be? One more journey is planned, 1,000 miles away up the River Lee to a place near Guilin. There, Jean can test the theory that the unknown primate is a primeval survivor.
So after the hair analysis, I just felt great elation and like a weight was just thrown off of my back. Because until that point in time, I was getting nowhere. The results of the hair analysis came and all of a sudden, bing, an idea went off and I felt as if, at least for me, the answer was there. And that is, yes, there's a good possibility, a high possibility that some kind of either unknown primate or a known primate with a new range exists, and one or both of those helps explain the tale of the wild man.
As they travel upriver, Jean and Richard endlessly debate the possible identity of Wildman, even the chance, given its red hair, that it might be an unknown relative of the orangutan.
And all those, the people I met, talked about the quadrupedal movement.
Well, the only thing that could make it in orangutan is the hair color. I mean, that's basically what we're judging on. And somebody said it had a big belly, which orangs have, but
why do orangs have red hair? Does anyone know? I mean, we don't know that.
Well, you know, why isn't the moon made out of green cheese?
But the practicing orangutan may not have had red hair. We don't know that.
This hauntingly beautiful place is famous among anthropologists because in these jagged peaks, the remains of an ancient giant ape have been found.
Centuries ago in China, there was a huge hairy animal that could have been ape or human. This is Gigantopithecus. It is supposed to be extinct, but perhaps it's still alive today. Is this wild man? That would be interesting and exciting because, you know, wow, an animal that everybody thought was extinct a few 100,000 years ago somehow survived until the present day. That could really get you going.
Gigantopithecus lived 500,000 years ago and has left traces in China, Vietnam, and India. But the richest fossil find was here in this area. one mountain cave turned out to be a treasure house of bones.
Yes. Which one? Yes, that round one.
They approach it with barely contained excitement. Is this the ancient habitat of Wildman?
Above the river.
The cave where Gigantopithecus left so many spectacular remains, 3 enormous jawbones and over 1,000 teeth, is halfway up a precipitous rock face. Previous Western attempts to get into the cave failed, but Gene has worked out a plan. He's persuaded the locals to build rope ladders and attach them to the rock face. Now, like a general with a daring strategy, Gene finds himself reluctant to lead the charge.
I'm not one who likes heights. I don't climb ladders. I was really frightened. And you know, I got about halfway up, and all of a sudden it hit me what I was doing. And that's when I really panicked. I thought, oh, don't let me chicken out. You know, get to that ladder. Don't let me chicken out.
It's fun to climb up and you look around and the wind blows a bit and you get a great view. And there's always that element of excitement.
Gene and Richard are looking for some fossil evidence that will link the hairs they've had analyzed to the giant ape that once lived in this cave.
I never thought that I would get to the Gigantopithecus cave. I mean, I never hoped about it. Because, you know, no Western scientists have been there.
Oh, there's little bones up here. Something's been nesting here.
Fossil bones?
No.
Be careful.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
Of all the theories about an unknown primate called Wildman, the fragments that remain of Gigantopithecus best fit the picture.
But then we began to wander around. It's the kind of place you could wander around for in days because the cave system just keeps going on and on and on. You can't help but think, you know, what else is in here?
So our story ends in the mountains, where a wild ape once held dominion. Is it possible that Gigantopithecus is the Chinese Wildman? It's an idea that can no longer be dismissed. The first scientifically convincing evidence now suggests the legend of Wildman is more than merely legend. The true story of this unknown primate remains to be told.
If you're enjoying all this rare and unique content, please show your support by subscribing and leaving comments.